give them.
I'm going to stand here. Can everybody hear me? Okay, if I get too loud, you can tell me too, all right? I've been told that I do that sometimes. I'm board president of the Allegheny Defense Project. We're a 501c3 organization that work on protecting the wild forests and rivers of the Allegheny National Forest. That's Pennsylvania's only national forest and one of the 4 we have on the in the Northeast. You have one national forest in New York, and it's the Finger Lakes, and it's a tiny forest, I want to say about 80 acres. When Mary and I, this is my wife Mary, we live in Kane in McKean County, which is south of Olean, New York. We're close to the New York border. We live in basically a gas development. Marcellus is building in our area, and our organization's dealt with shallow oil and gas well drilling on the Allegheny. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about what we know from that experience when you see an industrialization of a forested landscape and what you can expect in your own area if that happens. Marcellus Drilling's just started. The first 5 wells have been drilled on the Allegheny National Forest. One of them is 6,000 feet from our home, and they're going to drill another well this summer, and that one will actually go under our house and water well. So we're very concerned about what's happening there. Our neighbor, Dr. Jan Henricks and Christine Henricks, have a Marcellus well going in about 800 feet from their home, and organic gardens and spring and water well. So they've been fighting that well location for 2 years. When we left Pennsylvania this morning, the township supervisors for Darlington Township in Beaver County in western Pennsylvania had issued a cease and desist order to Chesapeake Gas Company to not drill on their well pad that they were proposing to do. They needed a conditional use permit under Darlington Township's zoning law. And they would have had to have a public hearing, and 2 public hearings were scheduled, and Chesapeake canceled both of them. So basically Chesapeake told the supervisors yesterday in Darlington Township that they will not abide by the cease and desist order, and they brought a small drilling rig in to, quote, punch a hole in that site to hold the lease. What's happened in Pennsylvania is we passed, not we, our legislators, against our wishes, passed Act 13. It's one of the most egregious and undemocratic laws that have been passed, and anti-environmental laws in the nation, actually. And what it does is it allows the oil and gas industry, specifically the Marcellus industry, to put a well 500 feet from your home, build a compressor plant 750 feet from your home, put a frack water storage pond 300 feet from your home. Yeah, it's terrible. It puts a gag order on doctors, so that doctors who treat a patient that's brought in, if they treat a patient who's been exposed to chemicals on a work site, they're not allowed to tell anybody what chemicals they treated that person for. They're actually gagged. It removes all liability for drilling companies, vendors, and service companies that supply the drillers with liability. They just wrote it into the law. So basically municipalities are now suing and actually attempting to show that that law is unconstitutional. And a judge just recently said that the law can't go into effect. The other thing that they did in the law is they removed all zoning. They can put a well anywhere, in any residential area, next to a school, a hospital. They removed all zoning that we had in Pennsylvania, so our planning is kaput. If you bought a house in an area that was zoned residential, you can forget about it. It doesn't mean anything anymore as far as the oil and gas industry goes. So that's currently being litigated, and a judge last week actually put a hold on that law moving forward on the zoning portion. The rest of the law is going into effect. So that's where we are currently leaving Pennsylvania this morning. So in 2010, the Pennsylvania Office of Homeland Security was caught surveillancing ordinary citizens who are opposed to hydraulic fracturing. They were actually surveillancing them and their groups and their organizations, and they were reporting that information back to the gas companies. So we have a law enforcement agency actually reporting to the gas companies on citizens who are doing basically what they're allowed to do in a democracy.
Oh my God.
We'll keep going. So I want you to know what I hear when I go to meetings in Pennsylvania. So when I was at an EPA hearing on deep injection wells in Pennsylvania, which we have the wrong kind of geology in Pennsylvania. We're fractured from existing oil and gas wells and abandoned wells and coal mining, and so putting deep injection wells in Pennsylvania is a crazy idea, but that's what the EPA is approving. So when I was at the meeting in February of 2011, a gas industry representative sitting across the table from us at that meeting said, "We're ready for New York as soon as that moratorium's lifted." So you need to know that they don't think much of your regs. And if Chesapeake is doing that today in Darlington Township in Pennsylvania, how do you think they're going to treat you in New York? Do you think they're going to be better? I doubt it. Mary and I are both appealing Shell Oil Company's waiver that our township, Hamlin Township in McKean County, granted Shell. Shell doesn't want to follow our stormwater management requirements for excavating within our township. So they just basically brought their high-paid lawyer up from Pittsburgh in February, intimidated our township supervisors at our public meeting, and told them that our stormwater management ordinance was superseded by Act 13, which it's not. And we're currently appealing that permit with the help of the Widener Environmental Law Clinic in Harrisburg. So you're being bombarded, I know we are in Pennsylvania, and when you look at what's being hyped, these are quotes right out of the New York Post, basically talking about what needs to be done in New York and to get this moving. And they don't mention the risk, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. That's a rig that just blew up. In Pennsylvania, we've had rigs burn and blow up and burn. We've had blowouts in Clearfield County, south of where I live, in the Moshannon State Forest. It took 16 hours to stop the blowout. They had to fly a crew in from Texas on a jet. So these are the kinds of things that are going on in our state, in West Virginia, Wyoming, Colorado, Ohio. So we think there are accidents that you need to know about. Okay, we'll just keep moving. So on March 29th, the Lathrop compressor station blew up near Dimmick, PA, if you've heard of Dimmick.
Oh, I heard about that.
Yeah, and it blew up, and our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection asked Williams Field Service, who owns that compressor station, to stand down and not restart until they got an engineering report to the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection. Williams just ignored him and started that up the next day. So there's been no study on what caused it. We'll keep going. So just so you know, you're dealing with pipelines to supply those compressor stations. Those are 24-inch pipes in diameter, huge. And you wouldn't want that running by your home. And so you've got a network of high-pressure gas lines going in everywhere with very little regulation. FERC, the federal agency that is supposed to regulate gas lines and things like that, they don't handle like gathering lines from a well to a compressor plant. That's not under their purview. They don't do it. And the DEP in Pennsylvania doesn't know if they do. And the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission doesn't know what they regulate either. And that's the state in Pennsylvania. We're basically in the stage that Dr. Ingraffia from Cornell University described. We're in free fall in Pennsylvania right now. Total chaos. We'll keep moving. So, and the story's always the same. The gas companies repeatedly promise residents that their equipment will pose no danger. You hear it over and over. Whatever it is, whether it's the drilling rig, the gas line, the compressor plant, the gas processing plant. And then you have the accident. or the incident that actually shows you it's not safe. And so we just want you to know that once you let that start, it's really hard to turn these processes off once they got all this stuff going. And that's what's happening in Pennsylvania right now. So the New York Post doesn't think there's anything wrong with water, and we've had the investigative reporter Ian Urbana actually review Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection documents, and we found out 2 years ago that they were hauling contaminated frack water from Marcellus Drilling to wastewater treatment plants in small communities and running it through their treatment plants, and they're only capable of removing organic material like dirt and limbs and plastic bags. They can't remove heavy metals, toxic chemicals from fracking and drilling, radioactive materials that come up from the Marcellus shale layer. They can't remove any of those. Chlorides. And so basically they then ran those through those plants and dumped them in our rivers. And in this case, Ridgeway, which is south of where I live, that sewage treatment plant, you know, they had radium 275 times the drinking water standard. And other types of radiation 780 times the standard, what the EPA considers a standard safe. And then that drinking water was flushed down into the Clarion River, and 57 miles downstream, Clarion's taking it out for drinking water. And the same thing with Pittsburgh. The Allegheny River and the Monongahela River at Pittsburgh are so contaminated with bromides, which are radioactive constituents in salt water that comes from deep geologic layers in the ground, the Marcellus layer. The bromide level is so high in the Allegheny and the Mon at Pittsburgh that the water companies have had to switch from using chlorine to chloramine, because when you have bromides and chlorine react, they make trihalomethanes, which are cancer-causing chemicals. And they had to make that switch. The only problem is people that have health problems like dialysis or heart conditions, they can't use chloramine. So you've got a water system that's messed up on a very large scale in Pennsylvania now that wasn't prior to Marcellus drilling. So we're going to keep moving. So I don't know where the New York Post was when the EPA told the residents in Pavilion, Wyoming recently that you can't drink your water, you can't bathe in it, you can't cook with it, don't use it. And open all your windows so your houses don't explode. The water is contaminated with hydraulic fracturing chemicals in spite of what the industry keeps telling you. The industry mantra is there's no contamination, no proof that hydraulic fracturing has ever contaminated drinking water. Well, and you know, we're in the middle of an EPA study to check that out, and it won't be done till after 2012. We're going to keep going. So Wyoming's air quality is now worse than Los Angeles's. This brown haze out in a rural Wyoming area is ground level ozone, smog, that causes respiratory problems. And you know, this is LA, there's Wyoming. Wyoming's air quality is worse in a rural area now in the gas fields. That's what's happened from shale gas extraction in Wyoming. So we know that. And we know that it'll travel 200 miles. So it's not, you know, what we're doing in Pennsylvania, I heard Sandra Steingraber say in Hammondsport, New York, on a panel when I was on with her, that she's already concerned that the air quality in Pennsylvania is coming into New York and affecting your air quality. Okay? It's traveling. We'll keep going. New report from Colorado School of Public Health, 3-year study. Air pollution from well drilling sites causes cancer. There's all the toxic chemicals. Benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, xylene, heptane, octane, diethylbenzene. Benzene's a known carcinogen. Okay, so that's what's in the air around drilling sites. That's what people are breathing. Why would you put a well 500 feet from somebody's house? Or from their school? Okay. So Penn Future, an environmental organization in Pennsylvania, they've actually filed a federal lawsuit against Pennsylvania Marcellus Driller Ultra Resources, and the reason why is the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection is just permitting a well, and they consider the air pollution from the well. Then the company puts a compressor plant in, and they give them a permit for the compressor plant, an air quality permit. And then they put a gas processing plant, and they give them a permit for that. But when you take all the well sites, all the equipment, diesel equipment running on the road for the road construction, for the well drilling, when you take all those together and aggregate those, you have a massive air pollution source. And so basically in our state, the EPA doesn't allow you to say that things aren't contiguous just because they're not adjacent to each other. Even if they're separated by a couple miles, but they're all the same gas project, they should all be getting one permit as a major source of air pollution. That's not happening in Pennsylvania or other states, Wyoming, Colorado, West Virginia, Ohio. So that's what's going on. How would you like to be in that house there with the silica dust being offloaded from the truck? Silica is a known carcinogen too. Okay, so you have to look at the big picture on Marcellus. You can't talk about shale gas extraction, unconventional hydrocarbon extraction, without talking about climate change. And what Professor Howarth and Santoro and Anthony and Graffi up at Cornell have found out by their study, their recent study that's not being attacked right now by the industry, their initial paper was, they have come to the conclusion that shale gas, when you take the entire development cycle, life cycle of shale gas, it's no cleaner than coal. It may be slightly dirtier. So we're supposed to be replacing coal with clean natural gas. And shale gas, the process is not clean, it's not green. And so you're producing a tremendous amount of methane you're releasing from the well sites, the drilling, the fracking, the flaring off, the leaks in the pipelines and transmission equipment, the power plants. All that's contributing to heat trapping gas in the atmosphere, and it's 20 times more potent than CO2. So that's where we are. So shale gas will not slow climate change, period. Okay, so Oklahoma's had earthquakes, then Arkansas. Arkansas finally stopped the deep injection wells after their citizens were just totally frazzled from being rattled by continuous earthquakes. Hundreds, if not thousands of them over a period of a couple years. So they finally shut down the deep injection well, where they're pumping the contaminated fracking fluid deep into the ground and causing changes in the geology and actually allowing plates to slip, and they're creating earthquakes. And then on New Year's Day in Ohio, near Youngstown, Ohio, they had a 4.0 earthquake that they have definitely identified as being the result of all the deep injection wells that Ohio's been allowing Pennsylvania to dump its contaminated fluids into. So that's where we are. We're actually making earthquakes. Not to worry, right? And then this is a site in West Virginia, Wenzel County, just across the border from Pennsylvania, Mount Morris, PA. And this entire hillside has slipped, the well site, and down into the stream. And there's your footers and valves and piping and everything went. And that's because that stormwater management ordinance I mentioned in my township, well, they can go out and move 50 billion cubic yards of earth at a construction site, and they don't have any regs that they have to meet. Where a developer who wants to build a home development, a residential development, or a mall, they have tremendous, criteria that they have to meet for compaction, and so that these kinds of things don't happen. But that's not happening out in the field. They're exempt. And so we've got 15,000 miles of pipeline proposed, running from Louisiana up through Pennsylvania, all of Ohio. And you've probably heard of the Utica shale layer too, that they're touting now in Ohio. And you notice you just got one little pipe network up in the Finger Lakes area, and that's because they haven't applied for the permits yet, so you don't know what they are. They'll be there. And what they're doing is they put a main pipeline in, and then they do what they call a loop, and then the loop can be out miles away from the main pipeline. So it's just the beginning of the you need gathering lines for Marcellus wells. It's not going to get to where they want to send it without all those gathering lines and pipeline system. So you're getting the pipeline system too. You're not just getting a well. We'll keep going. 15,000 miles and over 10 million acres will be disturbed by all that piping. A couple days ago in a adjacent township to where I live in Kane, Pennsylvania, the Kane Republican, printed the comments from citizens at their meeting, and they were there to talk about the truck traffic again out on their rural roads and the dust that's being caused by the trucks. And the standard calculation is that it takes roughly 1,000 truckloads of water, materials, equipment to drill a Marcellus well, so 1,000 truckloads in, 1,000 truckloads out on your rural roads. 18-wheelers have been traveling at speeds of 60 miles per hour on Pig's Ear Road, a very rural dirt road. Dust is so thick you have to stop from proceeding on the road because of lack of visibility. That's the other thing they're not telling you, but maybe the New York Post missed and didn't understand about truck traffic. We'll keep going. And we're actually seeing fatalities. Woman hit in the rear by a water tanker hauling water for natural gas, killed. 57-year-old father, the truck rolled over was speeding, reckless driving, overweight, hauling drilling mud. Rolled over on his Subaru Legacy, crushed him and his 17-year-old daughter, who managed to survive somehow. And we're seeing those things. And then we even have, we got to think of the workers too. Workers are being killed. I know workers who have told me they quit working for oil and gas company because they don't want to be dead. They don't want to be killed out on the job site. A lot of shortcuts being taken. So we're actually seeing fatalities. And then you have one of Senator Steingraber's concerns for New York, all these heavy trucks on your narrow rural roads with school buses, young drivers, just got their license, inexperienced, and also explosive vehicles, okay, propane. That's a huge concern. So what's the industry's response to all those things that are happening in our communities, in all these states across the United States where unconventional hydrocarbon extraction, shale gas, has been going on? It's that we're extremists. We're the ones that are the problem, okay? Fear-mongering extremists. Audrey McClendon, you've heard of him. He's the guy that basically flips leases. He doesn't really worry about the drilling so much. The money's in flipping leases. You buy all the land up, then sell it back to another company. That's what he's been doing.
Oh my God.
So we're the extremists, okay? That's the response from the industry to us. Okay, I wish those grandmothers knew that they were extremists in that picture. So the thing is, how did this industry even get started? I mean, when you think about it, they made all these assumptions and sold it to the American people. One of them was that we're going to reduce dependence on foreign oil. Well, the foreign oil consumption is rising in the world, okay, and there's developing countries that want oil, and so we're not going to drill our way out of, drill baby drill, we're not going to do it. We're not going to drill our way out of the problem. Even though they might be recovering more oil now in the U.S. than they did before, we've been on a downward slope since the 70s in this country on oil. So it's not going to reduce foreign dependence on oil. And gas is fungible. Natural gas is fungible. That's why they're trying to build liquefied natural gas terminals on the West Coast, the East Coast, Cove Point, Maryland. The permit's been applied for. That's the first one right now. And they want to export the gas to Europe, to China, to India, where they can get $8 1,000 cubic feet, $11 1,000 cubic feet, and instead of two point something right now they're getting for 1,000 cubic feet. So, and then it's going to replace dirty coal and its climate changing CO2 emissions. And no country, coal company, or producing state I know of has agreed to stop mining coal and selling it and exporting it and burning it. So how's it going to reduce coal? They just say these things and they get away with it. It's a clean, green fossil fuel. Well, I think we've talked about it. It's not clean and it's not green. And unconventional hydrocarbon extraction, it pollutes our air and water. It's not clean and green. I don't even know how to get away with that. And will reduce climate change. I stand by Professor Howarth and Professor Ingraffia's study. I don't need anything else. We'll keep moving. So, you know, the liquefied natural gas terminals the other thing is we're going to get cheap gas. That's what we keep being told. And they even try to equate natural gas with gasoline, which is not happening, okay? But if they export that gas, do you really think the price of gas is going to stay cheap in the United States? And once they get the gas exported, you know, out of the terminals, it'll be traded on the world market just like oil that's at hovering at $100 a barrel right now. And you know what that did to your gas prices. So the SEC is investigating discrepancies between what companies have reported to federal officials, data on what the wells will produce and what they've told their investors. And so it's actually been described as a Ponzi scheme. So we can talk more about that. It may not be as easy and cheap to extract. My view is that the only way it's actually profitable to do unconventional hydrocarbon extraction, shale gas extraction, is if you can externalize all the costs, the societal costs and the environmental damage onto the taxpayers to take care of it. If you had to do it, it wouldn't be so profitable anymore. So what we know, we now have about 11 years of data from Texas. And what this chart is showing, this graph, is that that's a 5-year period, and the well is declining, the Marcellus or the shale gas well in the Eagle Shale down there is declining over 5 years. So it makes sense to me why our legislators in Pennsylvania wanted to pass Act 13 and not start taxing the gas companies till the 5th year. They would give away the first 5 years. Okay? It's because they know that that's what's happening. This is well confirmed by reputable people in the petroleum field now at this point. They know that that's happening. Okay, we're going to keep going. So we have an old Appalachian saying, never talk to anyone over your fence that has sawdust in their hair or oil on their boots. We have a long history of energy exploitation in Appalachia, and we need to remember that. We're going to keep moving. This is the Appalachian region, and notice, New Yorkers, okay. We always think it's those hicks down in West Virginia and Kentucky and Mississippi, those poor people. Well, you look at the shale gas, how it mimics the Appalachian region. So we live in Appalachia, and we have a long history of energy exploitation. We're going to keep going. And if you think you won't be hit in New York because the Marcellus doesn't come far enough north into New York, they have all these other shale gas development areas that they want to do. And notice it takes care of New York. One of these does. So they're talking about the Utica now in Ohio and western Pennsylvania, which is deeper than the Marcellus. And they're also talking about the Mount Pleasant, which is one I don't have up here. So there is enough shale gas damage for everyone, okay? So don't think that you're safe because, you know, it might not happen in New York. It doesn't go far enough north. So our history of energy exploitation, it sounds very familiar. Company comes into an area, leases land, offers some jobs in a depressed economy, strips the land of its resources, creates health problems for its workers and those in the immediate area, and then leaves. Does that sound familiar? It does to me in Pennsylvania. And then the robber barons bought their right to be unregulated. After Act 13, I'm sure of it. Okay? We'll keep going. So we consider this in Pennsylvania the single greatest environmental catastrophe to impact our state's land base since clear-cutting our watersheds at the turn of the century by the timber barons and strip mining by the coal barons that occurred and left us with a legacy of acid mine drainage, which we've spent billions on in Pennsylvania to remediate and haven't even dented it yet. It's not even dented. We'll keep going. So this is some examples of acid mine drainage in our streams, and we're still trying to dig out from under this last catastrophe where we were sold a bill of goods that it would be, you know, a great thing for us. And that should be the warning to all of us. You know, it happened before, we know it can happen again. So we even had postcards in PA, strip mining. You could send one to a friend. Look at what we left today. Still there. So to add insult to injury, if that's not bad enough, we're doing mountaintop removal mining and just destroying massive watersheds on a grand scale down in West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Pennsylvania. And now we're starting Marcellus drilling, which is stripping our watersheds to place 20-acre sites on top of them. The industry started out, oh, it's a 3-acre site. Then it was a 5-acre site. Then it was a 9, they're up to 9 now. I've been out on the Allegheny National Forest and they're 20-acre sites. By the time you add up all the water impoundments and the drilling site, the frack water pit, the compressor plant sites, everything. So you're talking 20-acre sites. We'll look at a little more of that. And then, of course, the corruption part. Governor Corbett got $1.1 million from the industry to get elected, and he didn't want any tax because it was just too much of a burden. He didn't want the severance tax based on production. So we have no tax, virtually nothing in PA. We'll keep moving. And he was concerned about, those job-robbing taxes, okay? So basically, he's concerned about how they get all the money back to Oklahoma or Texas. Okay, we'll keep going. So if you follow the money, East Resources CEO Terry Pagula, he sells his Marcellus holdings to Royal Dutch Shell for just his Marcellus holdings for around $4.3 billion. And then he turns around and buys the Sabres hockey team for $175 million and donates $88 million to Penn State. Largest donation they've ever gotten for their hockey program. All right, we'll go. And so Penn State cranks out a study saying how great Marcellus is going to be. Wow, what a coincidence. And it was funded by the Marcellus Shale Committee, a coalition of gas industry representatives, and it's been discredited. It took citizens reviewing it, going through it, and factually assessing it, and discrediting it. And then Penn State finally took their logo off of the report. Okay, so just follow the money. So our organization, Allegheny Defense Project, we've been in existence since 1993, and we've been monitoring, we're going to keep going, oil and gas drilling on the Allegheny. They do shallow well drilling, and now Marcellus. So we've been monitoring that since 1993. And what we want to do is show you what we know from the Allegheny National Forest that can happen to your forested landscapes here in New York. So even though the gas industry tells you not to be alarmed, we're alarmed about the Marcellus drilling coming on the forest and in my neighborhood. So the Allegheny National Forest, the Forest Service calls it the land of many uses. We call it the land of many abuses. This unregulated oil and gas drilling has been going on for decades. And we're currently litigating in federal court now against the oil and gas industry. We monitor industrial clear-cut logging on our watersheds and oil and gas drilling. So this curved line is the National Scenic Byway in the Allegheny National Forest heading to the Allegheny Reservoir. And this is the minor run oil and gas development the Forest Service let them put along the National Scenic Byway without protecting scenic standards. And over here, this area is the Morrison Run remote area. At least it was remote. If you look right here, you begin to see the same roads and well sites. Each one of those curved areas is a well site and a road and a well site and a well site and a road. And that's the pattern you see on a 500-foot grid across the landscape. So in a year's time, that Morrison Run remote area was moved out of remote status, doing forest planning when we were trying to have a study for wilderness protection. So we're the most heavily industrialized national forest in the country, more wells than all the other forests combined, 12 to 15,000 wells. And for years, the Forest Service we'll keep going, they rated how many wells there were until they got into federal court in our lawsuit and had to admit it was like 15,000 wells, not 8,000 like they put in their forest plan in 2007. So 4,000 wells drilled just between 03 and 08. And we don't follow the National Environmental Policy Act. The driller comes in, says, I want to develop, hands a development plan to the Forest Service. They don't do NEPA or an environmental analysis. They just let them drill and build roads. So they don't know what the impacts are on the environment. And this is typical road building in the Allegheny. This excavator's went through a rock formation in here that was rattlesnake habitat without any environmental analysis. Too late, it's gone. And this is what they do. They build a series of roads. And this is probably the worst thing you can do for climate change. they push all the trees over by the stumps. And we know from the Max Planck Physics Institute in Germany that we once thought all the carbon was sequestered in the tree trunk or the bole of the tree, but now we know that it's sequestered in the roots and the soil around the roots. So when you push all the stumps over and tear them out of the ground, you've released massive amounts of carbon and you're just accelerating climate change. Wrong approach for a national forest or anybody's property, woodlot. And then there's illegal surface mining. You need to be aware, all these roads that they're going to need to build for Marcellus well sites and these huge well pads and compressor sites, it's going to take stone, and that stone is going to require surface mining. So you're going to have additional scars on the landscape in the form of, this is an aerial view of a stone pit. And there are hundreds of those on the Allegheny currently. Okay, we'll keep going. And they blow drilling fines and drilling fluids out in waterways on the forest. We've been trying to get that stopped. And you have pollution from infrastructure that they don't even monitor. Nobody's monitoring. And you have permanent infrastructure like frack water holding ponds and tank batteries and generator facilities. That you're losing all that on your public lands. And you'll have that on your private lands too. How would you like to have a tank farm next to your house, off-gassing benzene fumes in the middle of the summer? Try opening your window. So we had an oil spill in August of 2009, and actually the beavers helped save the North Fork, which was it's a high-quality cold water fishery, trout stream, and the beaver dam actually slowed the flow of the oil, 40,000 gallons, as it tried to make its way down the North Fork into the Allegheny Reservoir. So actually those beavers that nobody thinks are important do really important things, okay? A lot smarter than us. The drilling company here, Howard Drilling, just obliterated a half-mile stretch of the North Country National Scenic Trail. This is a trail that goes from the Finger Lakes out to North Dakota and will eventually connect to the Sierras out in California. They just obliterated because they thought it'd be cool to use the road or the trail for, the walking trail for a road and well pad site. They put 5 pads across there before anybody told them to cease and desist. So I always like these signs because this is my favorite one in the forest, if it wasn't so sad. No camping within 1,500 feet. Remember that National Scenic Byway? Okay, well, they don't want you camping within 1,500 feet either side because that would take away from the scenic beauty of the National Scenic Byway. But you can go ahead and put an oil and gas development right alongside it. So you go figure how they decide that. Human heritage sites. They are not being protected in this mad rush to frack. And one of the biggest problems is not only the well sites, but gas pipelines. They're completely exempt from environmental assessment and historic archaeological assessments. So they're just plowing gas lines across the countryside through human heritage sites. This is a rock cliff structure in Tracy Ridge, National Recreation Area. But they're just, these sites are being obliterated, we're losing them. And if you think, like you have a pristine remote area in a state forest or national forest, or maybe you have a conservancy that maybe preserves some area and it won't be impacted. I don't know. I've seen a lot of leases made, between environmental organizations and the industry. And all these remote areas on the Allegheny are all under assault right now. So there's no holds barred on drilling. If they want to put a well there, that's what they want to do. We're flying over the Allegheny Front National Recreation Area to show you unfragmented forest, what you want your watersheds to look like. And this is what they should look like on the ground. And we'll go to the next slide. And this is what we're seeing in the Allegheny. Network of roads and well sites. Every one of those dots is a well site. And this development, we flew over in April and then we flew over in August. So in 4 months, that unfractured forest, was turned into this development. Tank batteries, holding ponds, rock pits, roads, well sites. That was just a 4-month period to give you an idea of how fast it's happening. So we know on the Allegheny from what's going on, fragmenting the forest, sedimentation in streams, we have this declining species viability, and that's what you're going to be dealing with if they're let loose on your New York landscape. It affects wildlife. And so all these species are in decline on the Allegheny specifically from oil and gas drilling. And the Forest Service states that there's gaps in nesting habitat exist to high-density roads and oil and gas and mineral activity for the northern goshawk. And so they say recent nesting success has dropped off for some unknown reason. Well, we're standing down here, and that's a well, and this is a road, and the whole hilltop's been obliterated over Canastota Creek, and the Allegheny Defense Project is pretty sure what the unknown reason is. Okay, goshawk requires 95% forest canopy for successful nesting, and they're down to about 78% canopy closure. So Calvin Coolidge, President Coolidge, in 1923 signed a proclamation. He created the National Forest, the Allegheny, to protect watersheds. That was the primary thing. They'd stripped the forest. Sediment was flowing downstream, so that's why we created the National Forest. And what we can tell you now is that there's declining water quality on the forest. Roads and streams equal, that's sedimentation. There's 4,436 miles of road in the Allegheny. Some places it's 18 miles of road per square mile. That's urban density. In those oil and gas areas, there's 2,924 miles of just oil and gas road. That means they don't meet any Forest Service standards when they build them. So the most recent study on the Allegheny shows that oil and gas roads increase sedimentation in streams 400%. And that's concerning. That's typical building. So when you go out on the first day of trout season in Salmon Creek, you'll watch the oil and gas developments up on the hill here, and you'll watch the mud flow down the stream, into the road ditches, down over the hill along the pipelines they've excavated, and into Salmon Creek, a high-quality trout stream. We actually use these pictures in a case in the Environmental Hearing Board in Pennsylvania. The judge actually ruled in our favor. So in the spring in the Allegheny Reservoir, you can follow the mud out of the tributaries. And the Army Corps of Engineers that manages the reservoir, they tried to tell us that this was mid-level mixing. And you could follow the mud down from the logging and the oil and gas development up on the hills. And that's what you see. Notice there's none coming out of here. So we're working with the Adirondack Mountain Club. This is the New York-Pennsylvania border. This is Allegheny State Park in New York, where you don't allow drilling or logging. And this is the Allegheny National Forest. This is a Audubon IBA, an important bird area. And across here, where you see all the oil and gas development on the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania, where the oil and gas drilling is unregulated, the Forest Service doesn't recognize this as an IBA, an important bird area, because they think that the birds know not to fly across them. Think about it for a while. So what we've been doing is we're worried about this oil and gas encroaching into Allegheny State Park, and so we're working on a boundary survey with the Department of Parks, New York State Parks System, and the Adirondack Mountain Club. And we're actually going around and finding the original granite boundary markers. It's up and down, over hill and dale, through rough terrain, to find these markers, GPS them, survey them, and then clear the line so that there's actually a clear line, and the oil and gas industry knows that's where you stop. You don't go into Allegheny State Park in New York.
So, are they paying attention to that, though?
Yeah, Allegheny State Park is watching, and yeah, they are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that is one thing they're serious about.
Keeping them out? Good.
So far.
Yeah.
In that picture where they're doing the development in Pennsylvania, the U.S. Energy, out of Buffalo, New York, they had so many violations that the DEP, after years in Pennsylvania, finally shut them down. First thing U.S. Energy did was saying, well, fine, we'll go over into Allegheny State Park where we own 60 acres of leaseholding, and we'll start drilling over in your park. And I will tell you, New Yorkers care about their state parks. Okay, and so there was such an uproar that U.S. Energy didn't start drilling. And then the DEP in Pennsylvania immediately lifted the moratorium and let them come back. So they're back drilling. But in August of 2010, scientists, biologists were actually in Allegheny State Park in Jaeger Run collecting water samples, and this milky white substance comes flowing down Jaeger Run into New York from Pennsylvania and the Allegheny National Forest. We'll keep moving. And so Allegheny Defense Project went back up onto that hill where we saw those aerial photos before along the border, and we found U.S. Energy's site. And here's the milky white substance on the excavator where they were, starting fracking pits. It was overflow from fracking pits. And here's a frack pit, unlined. It's 2012. Everybody knows what the regs are, right? There's an unlined, it's supposed to have a 30 mil liner to contain the fluids. And the worst thing is they put these all over the forest, all over the landscape. They bury this stuff on site. So imagine all the sites, all these frack pits buried, thousands of them all over your landscape. It's insane. So go ahead, Mary. And so we found leaking wellheads, that methane going up into the atmosphere, and we found no erosion and sedimentation controls and no spill prevention control plans. You're supposed to have dikes around the tanks that will actually contain the fluids in that tank. So there's no dikes. And this is going on in 2012. So if you're thinking your agency, and this is Jaeger Brook in August, and it's not over the soles of my hiking boots, and they just dammed up, the oil and gas company just made a dam in Jaeger Brook and fired up the pump and started pumping water out for fracking. This is conventional, shallow oil and gas drilling, but same idea, hundreds of thousands instead of millions of gallons of water. So the Forest Service told citizens in PA, hey, the Allegheny may not be so remote anymore, so you should just go somewhere else. Can you believe that? They actually put that in their forest plan. We told them it wasn't a good idea. We'd come back to harm. So now we go to our state forest in Pennsylvania, and this is Loyalsock. There's a Marcellus drilling site up on a remote ridge.
Oh my God.
Now it's started in the state forest. Thank our Republican legislators. Fortuna Marcellus site in Tioga State Forest. That whole site, combined site's over 20 acres. It's 22 acres. And notice this impoundment's 14.8, and this impoundment here is 8.5 million gallons. That gives you an idea of the water they're hauling around and sucking out of streams, buying from sewage treatment plants. They're treated effluent, buying from water companies, municipal water companies, anywhere they can get the water. Okay. I wanted to show you this just to give you an idea. One of the myths in the Marcellus industry is, we won't need as many well sites because they're bigger and they're further apart. So here's the well sites leapfrogging through the Moshannon State Forest. And 2 currently under construction. And a pipeline. That's the Elk State Forest. They cleared an oak forest here to put that Marcellus site up. And if you're used to shallow oil and gas well drilling, half-acre sites, and you haven't seen a Marcellus site, you're in for a shock because it's like oil and gas drilling on steroids. 20-acre sites. So you got 5 to 20-acre sites. You're seeing the 5-acre. There's the wellhead for a well that PGE drilled on the Allegheny. That's 5 acres. And then across the road, there's 2 acres for a frack pond. And up on this ridge here where the trees are kind of thin, there's 10 acres for a water impoundment and a soil storage area. So it's over 16 acres there, that site. You have permanent water impoundments for millions of gallons. The most recent well drilled near our home on the Allegheny, we know from court records because they had to tell the judge, it was 7,560,000 gallons of water for one Marcellus well. Okay? And you'll see figures, 3 million, 2 million, they downplay it. 7,560,000. That's in court records. Okay. And this is the Windy City area of the Allegheny National Forest, and we're on the east side of the Tionesta Scenic and Natural Area, which is another Audubon IBA, important bird area. All this development here occurred in a year. And if you go back in here and drive down the main road and don't stay on the main road, you'll get lost back there. It's such a maze of road right now. So, they're telling us, go back to that other picture, Mary Canyon. We don't need as many sites. They'll be bigger, they'll be further spaced apart, okay? That's one of the myths. Okay. So you go out to Colorado and the Jonah Field, the Green River Basin, all you see is a maze of sites and roads. Looks the same, just bigger sites. Okay, these sites around the Colorado River, they're down to 10-acre well spacings. So, when they tell you there'll be one well every 640 acres, you can't believe it. It'll be one whatever they want, okay? And so, where do we get our information? Well, all our information comes from the companies. Their slick brochures, their landmen going around talking at your house. How do we know they're environmentally friendly? Because they tell us. They got the ads on TV, on the radio. Okay. And, but we know, because of the Professor Howarth study, that's not true. Natural gas is a dirty fossil fuel. Total emissions from coal would be equivalent or very slightly less than the estimate for shale gas, and that should say shale gas. Okay. So say fracking's a fairy tale. They don't know what's happening when they frack. When they tell you we know what's going to happen, it won't affect your water, they don't know that. Okay. So another industry myth was, we had the 2004 EPA study, and it showed that shale gas hydrofracking does not contaminate groundwater. Well, we know that from Pavilion, Wyoming. That's long gone. But in 2004, that study was actually about coal bed methane. So the industry didn't tell anybody that. It had nothing to do with hydrofracking. And now, once the EPA whistleblower Wilson told what was going on, that the science was manipulated by the industry, participation in it, basically Congress ordered the new site, or the new study 2 years ago, 2010, and now it's supposed to be completed in 2012. We'll see what happens. And because we design everything so well, nothing can happen. Another myth. So all these fracked water tanks here sitting on the site, they just, on the Avella site down in Washington County, PA, they just exploded, caught fire, burned a worker. I mean, the vapors coming out of the tanks, the frack fluid coming back out of the ground, is so full of explosive vapors, it just ignited. Okay? That's what you're dealing with near your home. How about 500 feet from your home? So, we pretty much understand hydrofracking now in Pennsylvania. We inject the chemicals in the ground, corrupt the water supply, extract the gas, and we inject the money into the politicians' pockets, and we extract corporate profits, okay? And that's what's happening in PA. We'll keep going. So, water aquifers can't be contaminated. We know PA geology and the legacy of the Industrial Revolution. It's high-risk drilling in our state. We have geologic fissures created by explosions and hydrofracking, and they go out 11,000 feet in those horizontal legs. And when you get a map from the Department of Environmental Protection, you're a homeowner, you get a map, they show the well site for the vertical borehole on the map. They don't show you the well is 11,000 feet out underneath your house or your school, all right? And we have Swiss cheese geologic formations. They don't know how abandoned wells are in Pennsylvania. They're guessing at 100,000 now, and maybe 300,000 wells drilled over since we started drilling. So they have no idea. They never kept any records. And we have abandoned coal mines, too, and existing. So we have plenty of methane gas to go around. Okay. So you don't have to go far. You can go to Collins, New York, where U.S. Energy polluted those homeowners' water wells with gas drilling. Conventional, shallow, but just the same. And this is one of the most popular items on, homes in Washington County, PA, Southwest Allegheny County, Collins, New York. These are called water buffaloes. And if you're nice and you don't say anything about the gas company, they'll bring you water until they get tired of it or just don't want to deal with you anymore. Or if you say something, they cut your water off. And in the wintertime, it freezes. Imagine depending on that for your water supply for your household. Okay. And abandoned wells are everywhere in Pennsylvania, and that's an abandoned well interacting with fracking that went on in another area of the Allegheny National Forest, and this well blew out in another part of the forest from the fracking going on in another area. So the push from the hydraulic fracturing, they found in British Columbia that they've actually had wells, Marcellus wells or shale gas wells drilled, and they were interacting with each other. So when they tell you it's not moving around, they're lying, flat out. In fact, in 1978, Ian Urbana from the New York Times did an investigative piece, and in 1978, the industry actually knew that they were polluting groundwater with hydrofracking and just covered it up. And the EPA knew. So we have contaminated water on the Moshannon State Forest in Clearfield County, PA, in the center of the state, from that blowout I told you about earlier that went on for 16 hours. So you find signs saying don't drink the water now out of the springs when you go out hiking. And you find contaminated water signs on Lyman Run, which is one of the springs below the well site. So it's still contaminated. Last time I was out there, it's been since 2010, it's still contaminated. So they can't tell you they don't do it. And then we should have listened to our former DEP gas industry hack, Secretary of the DEP, John Hanger, when he told us you can't do a large amount of drilling without zero impact. And some of these are chemicals and things you couldn't drink, there's no doubt about that. And we have processes that go on all the time in our lives that involve these chemicals, and we run a certain amount of risk because of the benefits. Well, I'm sorry, but I didn't agree to the risk, okay? And that's my attitude in Pennsylvania and a lot of other people in Pennsylvania. We're not accepting that. So it's about water, and it should say it's all about air, too. We need to, Sandra Steingraber says, don't forget to talk about air pollution. It's going to impact your health. Okay. We know there are interbasin and interstate transfers of water now. Genesee River supplying water for fracking down in Pennsylvania from New York. That's an interstate transfer of water. Nobody's regulating that. The DEC approved that, just so you know. I've seen the documents. We have Ohio River Basin water going over to the Susquehanna River Basin for fracking in central Pennsylvania. And of course the Delaware, everybody's up in arms and aren't allowing them to drill yet. But one of the things that they had water wars in the West over was interbasin transfers of water. Who decides who gets what water when, and what happens when there's a drought and you want your water back and you need it? Okay? They're moving water around. It's a net loss of water in your watershed, in your stream, in your basin. It won't be coming back. We'll keep going. So we got water withdrawals on the Ohio River. They just set up a site and start piping out. In fact, they went down into West Virginia along the Ohio River and piped it back into Pennsylvania so they could avoid any permits. Chesapeake, that company again, we talked about earlier. So if you think they're going to treat you better, think otherwise. So and then they just pull up a tanker truck, drop a hose in a trout stream, and start sucking water. In western Pennsylvania, we do not have a river basin commission that regulates the withdrawal of water. So we run under riparian rights common law. That means that only the landowner who has a stream flowing through his property can withdraw water from that stream without degrading the quality or quantity for the downstream users. And you can't use it for industrial or commercial purposes, and you can't sell it. You can use it for your domestic use, your livestock. All right? That's riparian rights common law. So we have the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They're rubber stamping. Their last meeting in March, they approved 60 permits, and you need to get on your member of the Susquehanna River Basin Commission for New York. You need to trash that person, because they had a meeting in March, their quarterly meeting. They approved 60 permits. When people tried to speak on the permit approvals, they wouldn't let anybody give any public comment. And then when it got rowdy in the room, they approved the 60 permits for withdrawals and ran out of the room. That's the Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They've been rubber stamping now for the last 3-4 years. There isn't a permit that they haven't approved. Let's keep going. So notice EOG resources, consumptive water use, very important word, and 2 million gallons per day. Wow. I love the way they say 1.999. Just so we don't look like we're taking 2 million, right? Don't you feel better? Susquehanna River Basin Commission. They've been just approving these things like they're giving them out like candy. Okay. So we asked the DEP in Pennsylvania, Hanger, we asked them in July of 2010, tell us your statutory authority to allow these water withdrawals. And we got a letter a month later saying, gee, we need more time. And they should know their law, right, that they're using. And then finally in September, we'll go ahead, Mary. In September of 2010, we got a letter back, and it took 3 pages to finally get to the nub of the issue. Their approval of water management plan does not give the operator any real or personal property rights. In other words, they're giving out water permits that they can't legally do. They have no statutory authority, and no person, if you lease water or you lease land to drill on, and the stream's flowing through the land, it's not your riparian rights. It's the property owners only, not the leaseholder. We'll keep going. So, consumptive, this is the key word, don't forget it. The water's not coming back to your watershed. Non-consumptive, you use it for agriculture, it leaches back down into the aquifer, and you get to use it over. Consumptive use, net loss of water to the river basin watershed aquifer because it's so highly contaminated with drilling fluids and chemicals and bromides and salts and radioactive material. It can't be treated. There's no plant that can treat it. The best they're doing in PA now is they're approving plants to boil it. They're going to take natural gas, boil the contaminated frack water, precipitate the salts out, and then sell it for road salt.
I heard they're doing that.
So all those heavy metals, all that radioactive material, it's going to be dispersed across the landscape. What a neat idea, huh?
They were also selling it as animal salt licks.
Okay, great. That'll be good for your animals. Yeah. So, and then 80% of that water after the well is drilled stays down in that well.
Yeah.
So cattle, tell me again. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'm sorry, what?
You were saying they're selling it for cattle licks?
They were selling it for animal licks.
Okay.
So any animal licks they put out, obviously, for farm animals, they would be licking on that.
Yeah. Well, this is the plan, and so they still can't remove those. So what's happening 4 miles away from where Mary and I live, our former county landfill, they're taking the drilling sludge, drilling fines, bringing it in, burying it in the landfill. And then they're bringing the contaminated liquid, and they're dumping it into huge tanks, and they're going to stir it up with absorbent material. And then they're going to bury that in the landfill. And then they're going to set up a plant and boil the water and precipitate the salts out. And then they'll bury all that contaminated sludge in the landfill. So basically you got a nuclear waste site in your community. Okay. We've got 10,000 permits in PA, over 10,000, and 5,291 drilled, and we're already impacted just at that level. And they're talking, the figures are between 30,000 and 70,000 wells, 700,000 wells. Take your pick, the industry uses all of this. Okay. And if you want to get rid of contaminated frac fluid, you can do what this truck was doing down in West Virginia when they caught them. Okay, you just open the valve and go down the road. And you have the same kind of topography, hills and valleys, great places to hide, and just open the valve and let it go. All right. So remember, when they tell you they're going to drill a well, it's not just a hole in the ground, okay? It's going out 6,000, 11,000 feet. 10 to 12 wells per site. They're going to fracture everything under the reservoir, under the ground. That's their plan. And then you got to have the gathering lines to get to compressor stations to push it into a interstate transmission line and run it over to Boston, where they're trying to build a liquefied natural gas plant. So remember, it's the whole schmear you're getting. Go ahead, Mary. So you got to remember about the hazardous air pollutants then from the compressor plants and the gas processing plants. Everything from formaldehyde, a known human carcinogen, to benzene, another carcinogen. And you have all the emissions from the pumps, the diesel engines running for months for the drilling equipment, trucks, you have dust, you have all those hazardous air pollutants. You got to look at the whole process. This is an enormous amount of air pollution coming your way, if you allow that to start. And so the DEP in Pennsylvania got caught. They went down and did some air tests on a compressor plant that was built right next to Pam Judy's 10-acre farm at her dream home, and her family is getting sick from this compressor plant. So the Pennsylvania DEP came down, did a little bit of air testing, and said, we didn't find anything. Okay, well, but you got to use infrared photography. So the TV station went down with infrared photography And guess what? There's fumes coming out everywhere from the compressor plant. And this is 24/7. These are tank batteries here, just to give you an idea. But you don't see the fumes otherwise, the volatile organic compounds. Okay, Marie? And so the DEP statement to Pam Judy was, well, it's some sort of hydrocarbon, and it's not qualitative, and it doesn't speciate. We don't really know what it is. Some kind of hydrocarbon. Well, we know what comes out of compressor plants and gas processing plants. They've been building them and running them for years. So we'll go. So you go to, all we got to do is go to Dish, Texas, where the mayor of Dish, Texas, Calvin Tillman, finally had to move. In April of this year, he moved his family out of their home in Dish, Texas, because his children were waking up in the middle of the night with nosebleeds. That's the same symptoms Pam Judy's having in Carmichael, Pennsylvania, in Greene County. Her family's breaking down with rashes, nosebleeds, headaches, burning eyes and nose. And so Dish, Texas, you got well sites all over, gas pipelines, and compressor plants. They built 5 compressor plants in Dish, Texas. We'll go to the next photo. So look at this road, the orange line. Keep this in mind. And this is the compressor plant, gas processing plant. And these are housing developments on both sides of the road. Okay? Now, next slide. This is Dish, Texas. You know, the industry, of course, did an air test in Dish and said, we didn't find anything. So Dish, Texas hired their own Wolf Eagle environmental firm that does testing for industry. And they came in. And this is a photo of the benzene spreading out from the plant. The known human carcinogen. Okay. Next slide. This is carbonyl sulfide, which is a neurotoxin. Spreading out. There's your orange line again for the road. So it's all over the housing developments. This is what the Texas DEC or Air Quality Department couldn't find, okay? So this is the list of chemicals that Wolf Environmental found in Dish, Texas, in the air, around the compressor plants. There are many, there are neurotoxins, benzenes, they're all, known carcinogens. Okay, so, and guess what? There's all kind of noise, which, I love it when the industry comes up and says, we don't know what you're hearing. Do you have air conditioning? Why do you have your windows open? I've had my windows open all my life, okay? The low frequency noise made by compressor plants, and this is from very nice personal experience with a chip mill where we live, it's in the same range as a foghorn. So it's low frequency, real long waves, goes through physical objects, through your house, walls, trees, and the first thing they'll say is, we'll plant some vegetation. Well, it's not going to do anything, okay? It's just a joke. So they found plenty of noise in Dish, Texas, and vibration. And that noise is the pollution that impacts you the most directly because you don't have to wait for it to get to you. Okay? Right away, instantly. So here's the conclusion in Dish, Texas. High concentrations of carcinogenic and neurotoxin compounds in ambient air. Known human carcinogens exceeded both short-term and long-term effective screening levels. And compounds with potential for disaster. What that means is explosive vapors are floating around in the air. And if you go down to Washington County, they took air tests on the deck of a house next to a compressor plant that was built next to them, and they have explosive vapors on the deck outside their house. Their house could blow up. So they're trying to litigate in court. So it's all part of our current U.S. energy policy. I've been around long enough. I remember Jimmy Carter and the oil embargo, and we were going to have a national energy policy discussion, and policy, sustainable, and it never happened, right? Okay, well, we're still relying on unconventional, hydrocarbon extraction to bail us out another time as oil declines. And it's still a dirty fossil fuel. It won't move us where we need to go, which is slowing climate change. That's not going to happen. And it's going to keep us from ever developing wind and solar. Because now they're saying natural gas is so cheap, we've got so much, we don't need to go to wind and solar. It's not economically viable. So we're never going to get where we want to go. We'll be stuck another 50 years with natural gas. Telomite Brune, the Sierra Club stand right now is that we're going to wean ourselves off of natural gas by 2050. Okay, too late, right? Yeah, so write Michael Brune, you know, the executive director of the Sierra Club, and tell him, Mike,
Who's paying
it's time to
him
move
say
forward.
that?
Pardon?
Who's paying him to say that?
That's just, there, you're looking at it as still as a bridge fuel. We need to, in Pennsylvania, we're trying to protect communities one at a time by passing ordinances. I know you're doing that in New York. We can talk about that afterwards. Our state legislators have just basically abandoned us. They've sold us out. And the DEP, they walked away on Dimmick on the watershed. You know, their job is to protect watersheds and aquifers, and they basically let Cabot off the hook. And they walked away. So they're not going to do, if they're not going to protect your watershed in Dimmick, they're not going to protect my watershed and Mary's watershed and, you know, Hamlin Township and McKean County. 2 years ago, Dimmick was a noun. It was a place. Now it's a verb. When your water's ruined, your air is polluted, people tell you you've been dimmicked. We're basically losing everything we've worked for our entire lives, our home and our property. You know, you get a gas compressor plant put next to you, I'm sorry, your health is going to decline. And your nerves are probably going to be a little on edge listening to the noise and knowing that you can't, you know, how do I sell my place? What happens if my water's ruined? People are actually going to their doctors. So we'll be unable to live on our land based sustainably. That's where we're heading if we keep going. And I think that speaks for itself. So that's where we are currently in Pennsylvania. That's what's coming towards you. And I don't believe the gas companies are going to treat you any better than they're treating Pennsylvania citizens. Range Resources, Chesapeake, Cabot, Chief, Ram. We have water wells polluted down in Connequenessing Township in Butler County in western Pennsylvania next to the Ohio border. Those people, you know, they're getting rashes. They can't drink their water. They're telling them it's safe. They're telling people in Dimmick it's okay. But we know it's polluted. Pavilion is just the first one. It's like the smoking issue we went through with the smoking industry for so long. Nobody could ever get the smoking gun, okay? And it's happening slowly, but in the meantime, my best advice is you would be better not to let them start. Because once they start, you're going to hear all the same stories, excuses, you know, that we're hearing in Pennsylvania.
Bill?
Yes?
What's the lifespan of one of these wells once it's been drilled? I know the damage.
Well, they're saying 30 years average, okay, and that they will refrack them, but the industry data is showing, like the graph in Texas, showing the decline. There's a point at which they're not willing to spend the money that it would cost to refrack a well, so they'll hand it off to some like smaller company and let them diddle around with it for a while, you know. But really, 30 years. But if you talk to Dr. Ingraffia, and you've seen his latest presentations, Dr. Ingraffia says that 2% of all the wells fail when they're drilled and fracked. They fail immediately in terms of contaminating groundwater. And then over the life of the well, it rises to 50%. So by 20 or 30 years, 50% of the wells have failed as the casings deteriorate. In adjacent Potter County, east of us, we've had casings just split. I mean, they blamed it on the pipe. They blamed it on corrosive chemicals. And when the citizen group ran that by Ingraffia at his latest conference, he said, no way, it's not happening from that.
How can we expect 30 years of you telling us the truth? We don't know about earthquakes. We don't know what damage is being done. We have to sit and wait.
That's the way damage from pollution is too. You basically are being poisoned slowly.
It's insanity.
Yes, it is insanity. Yes.
Actually, according to the Society of Petroleum Engineers, I have their documents, they say that the cement casings and the steel casings are only meant to last for the life of a working well, which is only 3 to 5 years. They already know, 3 to 5 years. The first year they get a 70% drop in their production, very first year. So it's not going to last 30 years. Their own documentation shows they know that the life of a working well is 3 to 5 years. And the cement and the steel, if it lasts that long.
It goes along with the Texas decline after 5 years.
Yeah, there's enough data now. We have over a decade, 11 years of data in Texas, so we know what the wells are doing. They'll be the same pattern. And we think, Allegheny Defense Project thinks, they'll do the same thing we were showing you on the Allegheny. They'll basically just leapfrog across the landscape. You know, they'll drill one hole, they'll drill and frack a well, they'll get the production up, they'll tell their investors that, you know, the production's way up, then that well will start to decline, they'll have to go drill another well, you know, and they'll just keep doing that across the landscape to keep the production up.
We live in the foothills of the Adirondacks, which is dolomite and limestone, and then further north is granite. But you say that we aren't, that we're not safe from...
No, there's other shale layers, and the map shows all of New York actually able to be impacted.
Below the limestone, below the granite?
It could be. I don't know the depths of all those granite, all those shale layers. The Utica is like 10,000 feet. Marcellus is 8, and they're in the Devonian layer. So they're jumping around right now, doing vertical and horizontal wells to find out where they are. And you should pay attention because, you know, I have a friend who says, how do they keep coming up with these really bad ideas? Who does this? The Northeast is being looked at since they couldn't come up with a nuclear waste repository out in Las Vegas that would actually contain the nuclear waste for 10,000 years. They're looking at the Northeast now, the granite areas. So you should pay attention to that up in the Adirondacks and further north. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of bad ideas floating out there. Nuclear waste, we've dealt with that. There's no safe way of dealing with it. But they still want to push it. And the only way they do that is Congress gives liability insurance to the nuclear industry when they pass the bills. And you can check on that. And basically, no insurance company would ever insure a nuclear power plant, but Congress will, under their acts when they pass it.
With our money.
With our money, yes. Yeah, it's just one bad idea. Germany is moving forward. Germany, France, Bulgaria, yeah, they've banned fracking. Germany's really working on solar, and that's because they have what they call feed-in tariffs. In other words, if you put solar on your house, you're allowed to sell it back at above wholesale rates to the electric company. The electric companies don't currently want to pay you anything. So they have what they call a feed-in tariff for 20 years, and it gives you above wholesale rates for your excess solar that you're producing, and you actually pay off your solar equipment faster, and so you can put more on. And Germany's been doing that. So we're basically losing, I think, out on the technology. So,
Done a great job. Unbelievable, beautiful. Tasha is our New York expert, and she would like to say a few words if we could keep it to maybe 5 minutes.
I'll keep it quick.
Okay.
All right, in New York State, our S-guys, everyone was like, woo, how close it was in Pennsylvania. However, in our S-guys, they defined it as 100 feet. They're allowed to come, the annulus, 100 feet within your house, 150 feet from a school or public building, 500 feet from a primary aquifer, 2,000 feet from a public water source, or 75 feet to a road, or 50 feet from a public stream or any other little creek or waterway. All right, so now one long lateral is a mile long. That's what we're being told we're doing miles. So 1 mile on one side and 1 mile on the other. Remember, they go out both sides, okay? They can go around. Exactly. So 1 mile is 5,280 feet this way, and it's 5,280 feet that way. So that's 10,560 feet. All right, so now where is 100 feet in there? Think about it. If they can put the annulus 100 feet from your house, remember, that's still 10,000 and X amount of feet that they're going to be going out other ways. That's still going to be fracking the shale, the methane's going to be migrating, the radiation's going to be migrating. Hamilton is slated to be a gathering station. They're voting on it tonight, all right? So we really need to start, Hamilton.
Hamilton, New York.
Hamilton, New York.
Not Canada.
Right. They're slated to become a gathering station for the pipelines that are coming in up from Pennsylvania and over from the west. All right,
Are
and
they crazy?
yes. In New York State, all right, in New York State, it's going to be going east to under the Hudson River and coming up on the west side of Manhattan. That's where they're planning on doing the LNG factory there. All right, so that's going to be the gathering station. Now remember, gas doesn't move by itself. Those compressor stations have to move it. So we're going to have large compressor station banks. Remember, in a bill from Congress about the air emissions, they travel to 200 miles, the air emissions. All right, remember, they attack the central nervous system, your heart. 89% of the chemicals harm the eyes, skin, sensory organs, respiratory tracts. 81% harm the brain and nervous system. 71% harm the cardiovascular system, and 66% harm the kidneys. So in other words, these chemicals destroy your body, all right? Hook, line, and sinker, there's no escaping it. So we've been going around getting petitions. We need help. We've gotten one moratorium in Madison County. The rest of you are vulnerable. Waterville's got to work on it. We've been going there for over a year. People don't show up in Waterville, we can't do it ourselves. We need the people from Waterville to go to their town board meetings. Just like anybody here in Madison County, we need you at your town board meeting saying, we don't want this. And even if it's not your town board, go to the next township. That's how we got Oneida County blocked off, except for Waterville.
Are you
Okay?
serious?
You know-
Yes.
Hasn't
You know,
done anything?
Right.
We gotta cut you short
Sure.
very much.
Okay.
I'm a chemist, and volatile organic compounds are really, really, really bad. And you know what the average lifespan of a chemist is? 55. Now, I know a lot of you are a little bit over 55. I am 70. And I'm lucky because I taught. I was only in that organic chem lab for about, 12 hours a week, smelling all that stuff. So I got a little nerve damage, I'm sure, but it's really, really bad. Bill and Tasha, they point out, and it's, I didn't realize it's all the construction that is giving off the NOx's
Yes.
from the diesel,
Yep.
et cetera, and combining, and that's what causes
PM10
the,
particulate matter, the very fine particulate matter that lodges in your lungs.
causes the
Asthma.
brown
Well,
haze.
Yep.
benzene has an air weight of 2.69, hydrogen sulfide 1.7, 1.7. So we already have.
Hydrogen sulfide is more poisonous than cyanide, than hydrogen cyanide.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, here's.
Tasha, we gotta call it close. We gotta get out of here by 8:30. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Folks, we have some newspapers about fracking on that countertop and some over here. Please pick one up, share it with your friends when you're done with it.
And please participate in helping out in your township. If we don't work together, we all fall.